Now, you're a clever lot, so I'm sure you spotted our deliberate mistake there. The referendums on the European Constitution, of course, were held in France and Holland, not France and Germany.
No, had the Germans had a vote, they also would have said no.
Well, that's pure speculation,
Oh,
Nigel.
I don't think so.
Andrew ended the film there with thoughts on foreign policy, particularly on the war in Iraq and the relations with the US. What's UKIP's policy on Iraq?
We were opposed to the invasion of Iraq. We don't like interventionist wars that clearly are not in the national interest. But what I don't want to happen is, because we've fallen out with our European partners over Iraq, for us to accept now that Javier Solana should become the foreign policy chief for the whole European Union. So I don't want us to be in hock in terms of foreign policy to America or the European Union. I want us to be independent.
So what would you do with Iraq now, the situation as it is?
Well, I honestly think that our continued presence there is making things worse rather than better, and I think the sooner, the swifter we can get our troops out of there, the better.
So you would cut and run?
I think we've got to. I mean, we've been there 4 years now. You know, if we say to ourselves, well, we'll only leave once things have stabilised, it could be like Northern Ireland. We could be there 30 years. No, I think the time has come to cut and run.
You said that you want Britain to be independent in its foreign policy. Isn't there a very grave danger that independence soon turns to isolation?
No, not at all. Listen, we've had organisations like NATO for the last 60 years, where sovereign states can sit round a table, make defence pacts, agree on things, perhaps sometimes disagree on things. You do that as an independent nation. What I don't want us to do is to give away the ability to control our own foreign policy. Now, the EU constitution may have been kicked out by the French and the Dutch, and the poor old Germans didn't get a chance. But you know, what's happening now is, through the back door, Javier Solana increasingly is speaking up. Issues like Zimbabwe, where we heard nothing from our so-called Foreign Secretary, and yet the European Union was speaking for us. So they're very determined in Brussels that in future the foreign policy should be determined there, and I don't believe that can be in our interest.
Is there not strength in numbers? I mean, we are no longer the power that we were. We have to admit that. Is there not strength in binding with the Europeans?
There might be strength in numbers if you all had a lot in common and you all agreed. But if you look at Britain's global interests and France's global interests, how on earth are you ever going to have a policy that's going to suit both of us? It simply won't work.
So actually Tony Blair's done you a favour, hasn't he?
Ironically.
By not taking us as close to Europe as he wanted to.
Well, he tried to take us close to Europe, but of course because of Jimmy Goldsmith and people like UKIP making the arguments, he couldn't take us into the euro, not because of the 5 economic tests that Andrew talked about, but because they conceded a referendum pledge before taking us in. But the one thing I have enjoyed about Blair's reign, and particularly in Brussels, is that he's tried again and again and again to reform the European Union, to deregulate the European Union, and every one of his attempts has completely and utterly failed, all of which goes to prove the point. Either we stick in the European Union and accept it for what it is, or we take my idea, which is we divorce ourselves from it politically and just have a simple free trade agreement. And Blair's helped, and the fact that he's been Prime Minister for 10 years, telling us how wonderful it is, but failing, has been a good thing for our cause.
Okay.
To find out more about who we are and what we stand for, go to the UK Independence Party website at www.ukip.org.